Hey, my friends, Derek from Bomb Socks with more Bomb Bites, where we feast upon the words of Christ one bite at a time. So we talked the last couple days about Ezra and his role and his whole book in rebuilding the temple. Now we're moving forward to the book of Nehemiah. Now, like I said originally, these two books were put together as the same book, and it does seem like they're kind of weaving in and out from one another, but Nehemiah's role was a little bit different. Now, let me take you to Nehemiah chapter 1. It actually says Nehemiah mourns, fasts, and prays for the Jews in Jerusalem. These are his people, and he's aware of what is going on around them. Now, you go to the end of chapter 1, and it talks about how he's just praying to the Lord. He's like, what can I do to help out these people? They were oppressed, and they were taken away, and now they're trying to rebuild this temple, and they're struggling. I want to help them out. Verse 11, O Lord, I beseech thee, let now thine ear be attentive to the prayer of thy servant, and to the prayer of thy servants who desire to fear thy name and prosper. I pray thee, thy servant this day, grant him mercy in the sight of this man, for I was the king's cupbearer. Now, Nehemiah was the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes of Persia. When you're a cupbearer, you're the guy who brings the cup to the king. You make sure that it is not poisoned, so you are very much into the king's inner circle. You are trusted, because if he is trusting you that nothing that comes to him is poison, then you're a friend to the king. So in chapter 2, you even see King Artaxerxes and his relationship with Nehemiah. It says, Artaxerxes the king, wine was before him, I took the wine up, gave it to the king, and now I had not been before time sad in his presence. So I can just picture Nehemiah taking the wine to the king, just like, he's got a sad countenance. Wherefore the king said unto me, why is thy countenance sad, seeing that thou art sick? This is nothing else but sorrow of thy heart. Then I was sore afraid. And so what happens is he's just like, I want to go back to Jerusalem. I want to help rebuild. People there are struggling. That verse 5, it says, I said to the king, if it please the king, and if thy servant hath found favor in thy sight, that thou wouldest send me unto Judah, unto the city of my father's sepulchres, that I may rebuild it. And then verse 6, it says, so it pleased the king to send me, and I told him when I was going to do this, and when I was going to be back, and so he allowed me to go in and help rebuild. And I love how in verse number 12 he talks about, he's like, look, I just felt within me that I needed to do this. It says, I didn't tell any man what my God had put into my heart to do at Jerusalem. And Nehemiah's role and what he wants to do is to rebuild a wall of protection around Jerusalem. You got Ezra rebuilding the temple, and you got Nehemiah who takes care of the wall around the temple. There's a couple cool phrases I want to focus on in this rebuilding process. Again, what I've chosen to do this week is to focus on how you and I are to rebuild our lives if we are struggling and just we want to rebuild things. Chapter 3, it goes through and lists a lot of people and their responsibilities and what they are doing to rebuild. Like I said, Nehemiah and Ezra have a very similar vibe to them. So for example, you go through some of these verses like chapter 3, verse 12. It says, next unto him repaired Shallum, the ruler, the half part of Jerusalem. Verse 13, the valley gate repaired Hanun. And anyway, these are kind of interesting things. So verse 14, this phrase right here I think is an interesting phrase. I'm going to take it totally out of context. But the dung gate repaired Malchiah. Now, what that really means is there's a guy named Malchiah, and he is repairing the dung gate. Great job, right? It's where the dung is stopped. Okay, fun job. However, the way that is phrased, like I said, I'm going to pull it out of context. It says, but the dung gate repaired Malchiah. So, as I'm looking at that, when you're going through the rebuilding process, there's a lot of dung and there's a lot of junk in your life that you're going to have to wade through to get yourself to a higher place. If you've gotten yourself deep into a lot of junk, you're going to have to get out of that. And you've got a lot of dung gates in your life. But I love how it says the dung gate repaired Malchiah. So if you look at it that way, sometimes I think these difficult things, these dirty jobs that we have to do, can be the things that rebuild us. And they can be the things, the hard things, the difficult things are the things that can bring us that strength. I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes that has to do with this. It simply says, on my way to visit the Jameses the other evening, I saw a wheat field that appeared to be greener and taller than the others. Thinking about it for a while, I concluded that occasionally some loving farmer drives over the field with his tractor tractor and pumps manure all over it. I thought, it's just like life. Here we are, minding our business, growing our little hearts out. We're really quite green, somewhat productive, and very sincere. When out of the blue, life deals us a dirty one and we're up to our eyebrows in manure. We, of course, conclude that life as we know it has just ended and will never be the same again. But one day, when the smell and the shock are gone, we find ourselves greener and more productive than we've ever been. Unfortunately, no matter how often we go through these growing experiences, we are never able to appreciate the sound of the tractor or the smell of manure. So sometimes those dung gates can help rebuild us. So again, taking that out of context, but I love the phrase there. Related to this, you go over to chapter 4 as Nehemiah is looking to rebuild. It talks about how the people had a mind to work. They're trying to do this here. And what happens is there is a mess. Now there's a cool related principle over in chapter 4 where it talks about how as the Jews are trying to build, again, we'll focus more on this tomorrow, but you're going to have opposition. You got these enemies coming in that are trying to mock them. In fact, in verse number 2, it says, "What do these feeble Jews? What will they fortify themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they make an end in the day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of the rubbish which are burned?" There's probably a lot of junk as you're trying to rebuild. When this thing was put down, there's rubbish everywhere. The people had a mind to work, but they still, verse 10, Judah said, "The strength of the bearers of burdens is decayed. There is much rubbish, so that we are not able to build the wall." Now, that word rubbish is mentioned a couple times right here. Rubbish is an interesting word. It literally means material that is considered unimportant or valueless. Now, as you are trying to rebuild, if your life is filled with things that are unimportant and valueless, it's going to be hard to build good things in your life. And so the importance of getting rid of that rubbish, those unimportant and valueless things. When you look at the continuum of good, better, best, these are the things that don't even fit into that at all. And so as you're going through those things to rebuild, you get rid of the rubbish, and like I said earlier, you allow those dung heaps that you're trying to clear out, you allow those to help rebuild you a little bit. So again, when you think about the dung and the rubbish, sometimes those are the things that can teach us some great principles about ourselves as we are going through the rebuilding process. I've done it myself, and I know it's true. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and thanks for sharing these messages. We're grateful that you do that. Please go check out our amazingly awesome, comfortable gospel-themed socks at bombsocks.com, and we will see you tomorrow. Godspeed. Bye-bye.